approval processes are part of every business. Whether that's an employee requesting time off, an outside contractor submitting an invoice, or the next steps of a project being seen and approved by all stakeholders, managing and streamlining these processes can accelerate the speed of teams and allow for projects to move forward quicker and more effectively. Automating these processes and having applications designed for you is going to make it even better. Hi, I'm Kevin from Budibase, and I want to show you how you can use Budibase to create an approval application, enhancing your workflow and allowing you to achieve your goals even faster. I have a whole load of sales and marketing metrics here that have been put through my approval process. I have revenue growth, I've got the sales conversion, I've got the cost of customer acquisition, I have the revenue over time for months, and I have the revenue over time per region. But this data is gathered from regional managers, and I want that data to be approved before it actually shows up on my dashboard. So in the first instance, in this new tab, we'll have our users submit their data. So they'll select their region, they'll select a year and the month, they'll input their revenue, their total marketing costs, number of new customers, monthly leads, sales. This will automatically auto-populate with the current logged in user's email address, and we'll have the selection for which approver we want to be able to do that. Once they're finished, I'll click Save Record. And that will do a number of things. It will save the record for one, but after that, it will also trigger an automation. This automation will send a Discord message. Now, you could send a Slack message, you could send an email, you could send whatever communication strategy your team uses, you can configure. And that will be sent to the approver to say there's something new for you to check. The approver will also get a link to this approvals tab, which will filter out all of the records that are just for them. And we can see then as they click on these records, they can review them and they can add any notes and they can change the status from pending to approved or needs review. If it needs review, then the original person will get another message to say, oh, can you go and check this? There's something that needs to be updated. If it's been approved, it'll be committed to our approved data table and then contribute to our dashboard page on the start. There's a lot going on in this application, so we're going to split it into two parts. In this part, we'll look at just creating the approval flow, and in the next video, we'll look at creating that dashboard. Let's dive in. As always, we'll start in the Budibase portal. We'll click on Create New Application and start from scratch. I'm going to call this my approval app and create. Now, at Budibase, we want to help turn your data into action. So it may well be that you have already started a workflow. You already are collecting this data in another data source. Maybe in a REST API that we could access, a relational database, a non-relational database, or a spreadsheet. I'm going to use a Postgres database rather than using the internal table. And because I'm hosting Budibase and Postgres locally, I know my connection string is host.docker.internal. The database I want to connect to is approval, and my username and password are Kevin. I'll connect, and it'll give me the option to import the contents of the tables that are there. There are two tables. There's the sales KPI table, and there's the sales KPI draft. So I'm going to fetch those tables there. Each of those tables will be fetched with their current contents, and using the schema, we'll get the data type for each of the columns. The approved data is currently blank. The pending data has a lot going on inside it. Okay, let's look at building the data collection form and the automation that we're going to trigger. So I'm going to design. I'll add a new screen, which is going to be blank, and I'll call it data collection. I'll then get the option to set the role-based access control level. It defaults at basic, but I can set it to public, which would mean someone didn't need to log in. But since I'm collecting sales data, that's not relevant. I could also use Power and Admin as elevated roles to allow me to be able to segment the different parts of my software for different users. For now, I'll leave it at basic and I'll click Done. Inside of this data collection, I'm going to add a form. So I'll click on this little plus icon and I'll click form. Now I want to have more control over the fields that I'm going to use here. So I'm not going to use the form block. I'm going to use a form. And inside of that form, I'm going to add a field group. So my form, I'll just set this to be the schema of my sales KPI draft. It's going to create form. I'll just call it my data collection form. For my field group, I'll call this my data collection fields. And I'll click on this update form fields button and I'll update. What that will do is it will inspect the schema of the data table and it'll add form elements that match. So let's see what we've got. I want to reorder these, change some of these fields and sort that out. So I'm going to move region to the top and I want to change this. Instead of being a text, I want to change this to be an options picker. So it's going to be my region picker and it's going to be for the region. Now there are two approaches to be able to provide this option picker with options. The first is I could provide custom options, in which case I would add my series of options with labels and values which are allowed to differ. So I'd have Belfast and Belfast. The benefit of this is that they can differ, the labels and the values can be changed. The disadvantage of this is that I have to implement this each time and add these options in. The second way is back in my data tab, if I go to region, and hit the three dots here, edit column, and change this from text to options. I can add the options in here. So Belfast, Paris, London, and Chicago. And I'll save those columns. Go back to my design tab. From my region picker, I will take the option source from the schema. And now in my drop down, I can see each of those are there. I'm going to choose that way. I'll give the label of region and I'll delete that region text field that was there originally. Next, I want month and year. So put year, change the label for a capital, get rid of that placeholder. Now for a month, my database is expecting numeric months, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through to 12. My user here can't always be expected to know that. So again, this is a good place for a picker. So add a component for a picker. I'll move it up here. There's going to be my month picker. And this time I do want custom because I want the options to be different. Because I want my user to see January, but I want the value to be 0, 1 and equally for all the rest of the months. By default, these options are sorted alphabetically, so I'll turn that off. And now I can see the months in order. My user can select the month and my database will get the number, which I actually need. So I'll delete that other column and now I've got my year and my month. Revenue sounds like a sensible field to have next, so we'll change the label to be capital R. Maybe we'll put it in brackets that we want this to be in pounds or dollars, depending on our source income. We'd have number of leads as our label, number of leads, number of sales, total marketing costs. And again, we can put the currency that we're collecting in parentheses and number of new customers. I don't want notes to be available here, so I'll delete that. And I don't want status. We want that to be handled automatically. So I'll set that to delete that there as well. For the manager who's filling this in, we'll do a capital M for manager for the label. And we'll set the default value by using this lightning bolt. And we'll do the current user's email address. We'll use the email as a reference. So it'll fill in with the current user's email address. Then we've got our approver. And I want these to be a set list of approvers. So again, I'm going to make this to be a picker. So I'll add a picker. We'll call it the approver picker. Get a label of approver and set that to be its field. We'll delete the other approver field. And I think we'll go back to the data and we'll set the approvers in here. That seems to make most sense. Because if we do this in more than one spot and we update it, then we'll want to make sure that it's updated everywhere. So I'll do my three dots, edit column, options, and I'll fill in it's admin at budibase.com and Kevin at budibase.com and approver. We can add in as many as we'd like here. And then back in our design tab, our approver picker then will have those email addresses available to them. Okay, so we've got our form. Now we're going to put a button at the bottom to allow our user to save them. I'll put my button in. I'll say submit button. We'll make it say submit. I want it to be in the center, so I'll wrap it in a container. So add a container. I'll move my submit button inside that container and then set my container to align my items horizontally in the middle and give it some margin at the top. So with this button, we're going to define some actions. So the first thing we'll do is we'll submit the form. So save row from our data collection form to our draft. I want to add a column of status to be pending. We don't want the user to have to think about that. So we'll add that in before we've saved it. And then we'll clear the form so that our user might want to add more data in for a different region or do something else. We could also at this point do lots of things. We could redirect to another page. We could set some state variables. We could, if this was in a modal or in a side panel, we could close those out. But for now, those two things are all we're going to do, and we'll save. In the navigation section here, in configure links, I'm going to add a link saying new. I'm going to link it to the screen we've just created and click save. And now we can preview this and we can see if it does what we expect it to do. So we've got our region, we can select, we've got our year, 2023, we've got our month, which we need to label, so we'll go fix that in a second. Got our revenue in pounds sterling, so maybe that's a new office out there, so maybe it's 1,400, maybe we've got 10 leads and 1 sale, and our marketing costs were maybe 600, and we've got 1 new customer. I'll set the approver to be approver@budibase.com, and then I'll submit. So the row is saved, and the data hasn't cleared. So let's fix both of those problems. So first of all, we'll add a label to this field, we say month. And secondly, when we click our button, we define that action to clear the form, but we didn't say which form to clear. So we'll just select that. Now, as that has persisted the data to our database, which is fine. Our approver then would need to know to log in, to check what the new data is, to update it, to be able to do various things. But we can use the automation tab to help them. So let's go to the automation tab and click create automation. And this is going to be new data. Create it. I'm going to trigger it when a row is created and click save. Now the table I care about is the sales draft table. So when a new row is created in that table, this is going to be triggered. I click add and I can do any of these things as a result here. I could use the OpenAI API to enrich this data in some way if I wanted to. I could query other data. I could do some kind of scripting, either using Bash or JavaScript. I could create alternative rows somewhere else or delete rows, or I can integrate with other automation platforms like Zapier and Make. But for now, I'm going to click on Discord and click save, because I'm going to send a Discord message when this happens. So to be able to configure that, I need to have admin rights on a server or someone to have admin rights on a server to do this for me. So I'll create a new channel called data where all these messages are going to go. I'll go to my server settings. I'll go to integrations. I'll go to webhooks and new webhook. And this webhook is going to be from our approval bot. It's going to post inside our data channel. And then we're going to copy this web URL here. We paste that in there. We give the name, we might call it approval bot. If we want to give it a little picture with an avatar, we can do that. And then we can put our message in here. So our message will have access to that triggers details. So I'll do trigger outputs, row, dot, approver. That's our email address. You have a new record to check and approve. Check it out here. And we can then give the link to our application. Okay, so let's save that. We'll finish and test our automation. We test it by adding a new record to our sales API. And the approver should be, let's say it's approver, and then we'll click test. We can see here a new row is created, that the Discord trigger was hit. And if we go back and check our channel, we can see it's there. You have a new record to check and approve. Check it out here. And here's the link to go and check out. Okay. So we have the first step in our approval workflow. Our users, our managers come and they enter data on this form. What we want to happen next is for our approvers, once they've been notified, to have a table view to help them be able to see the data and be able to approve and update it. So let's create a new screen. And this is going to be our approval screen. Again, I can set the role-based access. Maybe all my approvers are power users, maybe they're not, but I can make that decision in here. I'm going to leave it just as basic and hit done. I'm going to add a table block here. This table block is going to get data from my sales KPI drafts. And it's going to filter this data based on the status. So the status should be a value of pending. Now, it also should have an approver where it matches a binding of the current user's email address. So we can see here there are two records that have approver and I'm logged in as admin. So when I click save here, these two records are going to disappear because I'm not the approver for those records. So press save. We can see those approver records are gone. Now this table has quite a lot going on. I probably don't want to see all this data, so I'll hit configure columns, add all columns. I probably want to see the region, the month and the year, and maybe the revenue. Maybe that's kind of the key top figure I want to see. Get rid of everything else for now and click save. Now there's like a much nicer table here. See what's going on a bit better. So when the approver clicks on one of these rows, I want to trigger a side panel that's going to have the form for them to see the full data, to change the status if they need to, and allow them to be able to update that. So I'm going to add a form. I'm going to move my table block inside of that form. Now that's because I want this update form. It's going to be an update on our draft table. I want this update form to be accessible by the table block in here. So we'll see in a minute why that's going to be important. And inside of the update form again, I want a side panel. And this is where I'm going to put my form. So I'll call this my update form panel. And inside of here, I'll have the fields. So field group, I'll click update form fields. It will look up the tree and find the nearest form, and it will populate all the fields there. Now we'll need to do some editing of these fields and get things looking the way we want to. But for the moment, what I want to happen is when I click this on row click, I want to be able to run some actions. And the first thing I want to do is to open that side panel. So let's double check that that works in preview. Click on that and we get our side panel. So let's tidy up this side panel a bit because the fields don't look very nice and we'd like it to look a bit better. So as before, we'll want the region right to the top. And because we had these as an option, that's ready to go. Let's just change the label. We'll want the month and the year to be to the top. So year and then month. Now, month again, we're going to need to change to be a picker. So we'll need to do that again because the value is different. Now, what we could do is we could go to our data collection. We could find that month picker and we can copy that component. And now we can change the screen back to the approval tab. Go into our form field and we can paste 3 dots. We can paste. And so that month picker with all the data that we had set up there is ready to go. So rather than having to create it from scratch again, once I've done it once, I can copy and paste it between my components, which is super helpful. Let's delete the text field. Change year label. Notes. Well, actually, I want this to have more space. So I'm going to add a long text field and allow that to be our notes. Our status then, well, I would like some predefined options. So I'm going to put a picker in here for my status picker. So again, I can define the options here, custom, or I can go back over to my data tab. I can go to the status and use the 3 dots, edit column, change it to options, and then add pending. So after pending, it might be approved. As well as being approved, it might be rejected and it might need reviewing. So reviewing. They're kind of the different states that each row might be in. Let's save that. Back to my design tab, change that to status and check it has our right options. Looks good. Give it a label of status. Okay. So if I preview this application now, if I click on the field, brilliant, it opens it up. But what it doesn't do right now is it doesn't populate our form with the data from our table, which is what we want to happen. So to do that, I'm going to go back to my tables on row click options here. So we have one action, which is to open the side panel. And now what we're going to do is we're going to work through each of the fields and we're going to set its value. So I'm going to add action, do set update field value to our update form for the region. And the value should be lightning bolt, new table block, clicked row, dot region. And then I do that for each of these fields that I want to update here. As well as setting the form values, we also want to have access to the ID of the row so that we can update that record rather than creating a new one when we persist our details. So on our clicked row actions, the last one we're going to add is we're going to set a state value. So we'll go to update state. We'll set a value. We'll call it selected row ID. And we'll set the value to that to be the clicked row dot underscore ID. Okay, so stick that in when we do that. Inside our update form panel, we're going to add a new button. And we'll just get it to say save. So we want this new button to do two things. We want it to save the row from the form to our draft table. And we want to add the ID. So we'll go scroll down to go underscore ID. We use the lightning bolt and we'll set that to state, selected row ID and save. The other thing we want that button to do is to close the side panel. So I'll add a second action to close side panel. And we're ready to go. So now if we check and preview, so all of our fields are updating. Our administrator comes in here, our approver comes in here. They type in any notes. They go, yeah, good month, well done. Or maybe you've missed something here. Could you check? And then they can choose either to set it to approved, to rejected, or to reviewing. Okay. Let's look at the approved path. What we want to happen if it's approved is we want to create a new record inside of our approved table, inside of our non-draft table. So I'll call this approved data. And we want it to trigger when a row has been updated. And the table we want to monitor is that draft table. And we want a condition. And we want to check that the trigger rows dot status equals approved. And if it does, we want to create a new row. We want to create it inside of our sales table. And then we just want to fill in each of these. So our num sales is going to be our trigger outputs.row.num sales. We'll just go through each of these and we'll fill them in. Total marketing costs, so this will be trigger output row dot total marketing costs. And then if I want to, I could also send a Discord message. If I've configured my email, I could send an email, lots of other things. But for now, I'll just leave it. I'll finish and test my automation. So I'll take a user's draft and I'll just do a test of 9,000 in revenue. And so it didn't pass the condition. So let's finish and test it. We'll set the status to pending. It stopped there. And then finally, we set our status to approved. So it passes the condition, and we get an error here because we didn't fill in the rest of the data. So let's fix that. Set our approver, our month, our year, 111, our region. We get success. So our data table, that's been created. So for automations to run, it has to be in a published application. So I'm going to publish this application. At the same time, I'm going to go to the data tab and I'm going to delete these test data here. And then I'm going to look at my published app. So as the approver, I'm here, I'm clicking on this record. I get the update, I can see everything that's here, everything looks good. I might want to send some notes, I might not. I'm going to hit approved now and say, yep, I'm ready to go, hit approved. Now that record stops being on this table. And if we check the data table, we can see that indeed that record has been created. Now, as well as just checking whether or not the effects of our automation have taken place, we can also go to settings and automation history. And this will give us a list of all our automations that have been successfully triggered. And we'll be able to see that same flow we saw when we were testing and see those steps represented there. I'll add a link to that approval and I'm going to change the theme to make it a bit darker like this. So with that, we've got a two-step approval application. We've got users who can come in and set new targets for a particular month. We have managers or approvers who can come in and be able to check, verify that they are right and update them to approved or rejected if there's some problem that needs to be dealt with. And when a record's been approved, it gets added to our database. Once the data is in the database, we can use that to generate live reports that can represent our data in any number of ways. And to do that with a Postgres database, we'll have a combination of different things. We'll have custom queries. We want to transform our data in different ways. And we use different providers to be able to show the data both as stats cards and graphically as well. That's going to be the subject of the next video. Make sure you subscribe below so that you don't miss out on that. And I hope to see you then. Thanks. Bye.